Morning, this is TJ Cunningham, and we are going to spend the month focusing on the color of light, right? And so over the next five painting sessions, I'm going to be showing you how you can tell what time of day it is by what the color of the light looks like. And then if you flip that around, also you're going to be able to show the time of day that you want from your source. So that means you can take a source and make sure it looks just like evening light, or you can take it and make sure it looks just like morning light. You can look at a source that has some elements that you like in it, but understand why it's so silver, because it's not morning or evening, it's noon or somewhere near there. Now, I'm going to say that a lot of this has to do with science and the way light is scattered through particles, but it's so intuitive that you can tell the time of day by just the color of the light. And also, if something's happened in the environment, say there's a lot of smoke or something, and the color of the morning light is different than it usually is, you get that eerie sense that there's something wrong. Like we instinctively expect a certain color throughout the day, right? And so really, my goal is just to point us all back to that, explain why it's happening, and show it to you. So let me go to this is my palette where I have my paint squeezed out. But before I start, I want to talk about morning light. Typically in the morning, you're expecting, well, let me do this first. So think of this band right here as the atmosphere, right? This band. You notice that at both sunrise and sunset, more light, or the light is traveling through a greater thickness of this band than at noon, right? So shining sideways through this band, it's going through a lot more atmosphere at sunset and sunrise. At noon, it's coming straight through, right? And that means that the particles in the atmosphere, well, what they do is they scatter the light of the sun. So the light is least scattered at noon, and you get a very gray silver light at noon. Now, this is important because you need to understand that the sun's light is not yellow or orange or anything that we kind of instinctively think of the sun as being. The sun is light. It is white light. It is all the color that you can see, right? It is the whole wavelength of light. But what happens is that the wavelengths of the sun, and if you can think of that refracted light, that rainbow that we're all familiar with, you can split the sun's white light into different wavelengths, right? And as the sun comes through in the morning, comes through this atmosphere, its light, that wavelength, the red and the orange and the yellow are stronger than the blue and the violet. And that's why the sunlight looks more yellow in the morning, because the blue and the violet get scattered by the atmosphere, right? That's why sunlight looks different at different times of day. It's how the sunlight is interacting with the atmosphere. So the blue and the violet peel off, and we have this more yellow light coming through. Now, then it should be exactly the same at sunset, right? And it's not. We expect at sunset the light to be much more orange. Well, typically at sunset or at golden light, evening light, we have more pollution, more dust. There are more things, even more things in the atmosphere. A lot of the times there's more moisture in the morning, and also, so think of dew on the grass, that sort of thing, but also the pollutants and even dust, things that are raised in the heat of the day, are all settled after an entire night of no light, right? And none of the energy from the sun. In the evening, all of that is stirred up to the max, which creates even more particles, and the yellow light starts to peel off that wavelength. So that's that's my science from an artist perspective of this. Now let me just tell you something. If it's more helpful to hear it like this, in the morning you want a gentle yellow light. In the afternoon, late afternoon, evening, you want more red orange light. If you do that, you're going to have paintings that look distinctly like they were painted in the evening and paintings that look distinctly like they were painted in the morning. That's really the whole trick. And at noon, you have silver, almost colorless sunlight, not orange, not yellow, neither. So that's what we're looking for. I'm going to take this and move it to the side. And here's our color wheel. This means that the light in the morning is yellow. It's more of this pretty clear, clean yellow. In the evening, it's more like this. So the greens, you can even say everything that has light on it is going to lean more in this cool yellow direction in the morning, more in the orange red in the afternoon. So with that, let's take a look at our source and just note it's a beautiful, bright light. Now, I do know, because I took the picture, that this photograph was taken at 10:30 in the morning. But just notice how clean and yellow that light is. It really, you can see some of that dead orange grass, and especially if you have this pulled up on your own monitor, there's a little bit of color shift from my iPad to your computer screens and phone screens. But this is a clean yellow light, right? So we're going to start here, but I'm going to push it even a little bit more in this direction. I'm going to make it even a little bit more bright, clean yellow. So with that, let's get started. I am using my new rosemary brushes today. If you don't have rosemary brushes, it's totally fine. These are just bristle brushes, right? And I'm going to be telling you which ones I'm using and why. All of them are either filbert or flat, and I have one Master's Choice long flat. And you can see different bristles. I'll show you exactly what I'm going to do with that in a second. And then if we get to it, I have a few little tiny brushes. These are beat up old watercolor brushes that I can use for detail. My brush sizes go from 2 all the way up to 12. And I'm going to start with a 12. This is my 12 filbert. I just want a big brush that I can use to spread out a tone. Mineral Spirits, and it is Mineral Spirits in a little bucket here. Transparent Oxide Red. And I'm going to stain my canvas or my panel. This is a 9 by 12 inch panel. Now, maybe you're asking, why tone the canvas with orange if you're going to paint morning sunlight? Well, I'm going to cover this up, but I did think that through, and I think for the first time ever, I'm just going to add a little bit of bismuth to this as well. So we're going to move this a little bit more in that cool yellow direction, make sure there's lots of mineral spirits in there, and just to set the tone a little bit more in the direction of that cool yellow. Now, one other thing I'm going to do is wipe all of the excess off. This is only a stain or a tone. I want to get rid of the white so that I can choose the lightest light and darkest dark easily in the next layer. And I also want that warmth showing through my whole painting. So there we go. There's our nice little warm tone. Here's a little bit more of that bismuth. Get that morning light going here. Okay. Now I'm going to take my number 6 filbert and I'm going to do this quickly here. This is not so much a course or a series of demonstrations focused on design, but you can never leave design behind. So here we go. I'm going to draw thirds on my panel. Divided into thirds, left to right. Top to bottom. Not a whole lot going on in this composition. I'm going to be careful that I don't put the rooster right in the center, but I'm thinking that his head should do something like intersect right near that third, and then we'll have his tail come farther this way. This is just a sketch here. This really beautiful creature. Let me get that on. There we go. So you can see in the source photo, you can see in the source photo a little bit of that rooster being centered. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that the shadow band that is overlapping the rooster, I'm going to keep that right along the third, and that's this line right here. Let me make that visible for you. Okay, so if you look down on the little source in the lower left hand or lower right hand corner, see that white line that I'm drawing right there? That is that line of the shadow, and it's already in the source placed well. So I want to make sure I keep that on a third. So there's the rooster's head at this intersection of thirds. There's his body, and we're making sure that he comes farther back. And that just is a rule here. We want to give him space to walk into. He's moving this way. We just want to make sure that he can move into that space. Okay. And then I try to get his legs as close to this third as possible, right? So I set this up, and then we have this really wonderful rooster shadow being cast down this way. And it's a pretty basic composition, but it'll work well for our study here. Just going to fill in that shape up there. That's all going to be shadow. And the rooster, of course, needs to refine a little bit here. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes here just making sure that my drawing of the rooster is at least not terrible here. And just going to do that by looking at the big shape here, not wanting to get caught up in anything longer than I have to. Almost treating this like a plein air. So I'm noticing that his back is very flat, kind of curves up a little bit right there. And you can come down and to just see the big shapes of his body. So this is a guessing section. I'm not checking yet. I haven't checked yet. Just looking at that big shape of the rooster's body. It helps me to think of it like a map, like I'm just trying to draw a continent of some country I've never seen before. So I'm just trying to draw all the little shapes that make it what it is. As soon as I start only thinking of it as a rooster, it's going to be hard to remain objective. Got an angle. So I'm just looking at this angle, trying to judge. This is still my filbert, number 6. Looking at this angle right here, trying to see how that compares this to the flat. There's his head.
Tim,
Yes.
this is Maggie.
Hey, Maggie.
I loved what you just said about if you start to think of it as the rooster, your brain will be toying with the shape and filling in where it may not be accurate. I don't know if you've ever heard this or covered this in the past. Have you ever recommended that students try turning their source upside down so that they're just looking at the shape and they can't make it what it really is in their head?
Yeah, that is one of the best things that you can do. Turn it upside down, and then also look at it in a mirror. Those two things help so much. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, you probably said this a million times, but thank you for letting me just weigh in.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so yeah, as you're checking and trying to stay accurate here, one of the things that happens as we draw is it's very difficult for us to see our own mistakes, right? And so, is for me, is for you, it's hard to see where we've gone wrong. And so, what Maggie just suggested, looking at it in a mirror or looking at it upside down, if you don't have a mirror, or doing both, is really an excellent thing to do. Also, as much as possible, backing up across the room is also a really helpful thing to do, looking at it from a distance. Okay, so there's sort of the guess, right? I haven't done anything too fancy here. And now I just want to measure and see what's the length of the rooster from his beak to the end of his tail compared to his height from where his feet go into the grass. And I've just made him a little too long. You can see he's kind of stretched out. So I am going to just move him back a little bit, move his chest back a little bit. And it really should be something more like right there. And I'm just comparing distances there. And we're about to get into the fun stuff, I promise. Not that this isn't, but less color right now. Just wiping with my paper towel and some mineral spirits. Okay, one little fix here. That tail comes up a little bit higher. And I'm hyper focused on the big shape because that's the easiest thing to do. And also, um, that's all we're really going to need today. We just need the big shape. Okay. I'm just going to give myself a little bit more room, be a little bit more specific about his comb. And I can again go for the big shape here, but I just need to make sure that it's making sense. That's too much. I'm just going to bring that back out a little bit like that. Okay. I'm going to say that's enough for now. And if I need to do more, well, obviously we need to do more. Need to fill all this in with color, but that's good for placement and for design here. I also feel like these shapes are at least moving towards accuracy. It always helps for me get it as good as I can, and then kind of bring other things into that context, and then go from there. So let's start now with the next question, which is where's the lightest light and where's the darkest dark? Now, I do want to talk to you about this for a second. You see this value scale up here that I have. If your value is wrong, your color is wrong, right? And now, of course, all white and black, if you will, statements like that, there are ways around them in the art world. But almost always, if you're struggling with your color, it's because your values aren't correct. And most of the time, values end up being kind of in the middle. They're in that 5-6 value range here, where the darks have gotten too light and the lights have gotten too dark. So a way to avoid that in the beginning, painting morning light, painting any light, is to make sure you have good distinction between your lights and your darks. And so I'm looking for the darkest dark and the lightest light. And they are really, if we look at the source and squint, they are really going to show up in the rooster for the darkest dark, his belly, and then that grass is just I see that as the lightest light. I can see that this is very light as well, that bit of light on his back, but I don't think it's actually lighter than some of those in there. So we have this beautiful, bright, strong sun on the grass, making it a very light value if you squint at it. I mean, really, maybe an 8 or a 7 in value, not a dark value at all, even though it's green grass. And then the rooster, almost black right in there. So that's where we'll start. That's where we'll go first. Onto the palette. And I haven't squeezed out my titanium yet, because I use quick drying titanium and it would be dry by now. So it's not worth it. I'm going to stick with my number 6 brush. And here we go for the lightest light. Now I'm going to use bismuth, not my more orange gold ochre, bismuth. And let's see, may need some may need a tiny bit of the gold ochre, but actually just gonna use a little tiny bit of this red so it's not too green. And what I'm doing is I'm mixing the color of sunlight on this grass in the morning. So I'm really leaning toward that bismuth. It needs to be a nice, clean, bright yellow. And I already mentioned the value. I'm seeing it, yeah, right in there. Let me move that over so it's a little easier to see for you. There we go. Okay, so 7 is as dark as I would go, right? Right in there for this value. Again, lightest light. And then the darkest dark. Transparent oxide red, cobalt. Cobalt is a little less dark than ultramarine. So I'm using cobalt instead of ultramarine just because we can get it to be, I'm gonna use a tiny bit of blue in there or white in there too. Just don't want it to be pitch black. It's dark, very dark, but you don't want it to be as dark as possible here. And just gonna lay this stroke on over. There we go. So this is actually really big because now we have our whole tonal range. We have the darkest dark and the lightest light. All the values that'll make up the rest of the painting. We don't really have to guess at them. We have to compare them to what we have here. So this is where my number 12 Master's Choice brush, it's nice and soft, comes in handy. Typically, I've used a brush like this to remove glare. This is just a flat 12 bristle brush. You can pull up gently. Ooh, let me get to the side so you can see that. You can pull up gently on any thick, wet paint, and you'll remove the glare, those little highlights that catch on bristle strokes. The problem is that this brush also moves paint around a lot, right? And so mostly because I know it's been a little bit of a struggle to use that, I wanted to experiment with this and it's working really, really well. It's just much softer. So as I come over it, I'm barely touching, and there still is a little bit of movement on those strokes, but not nearly as much. It really preserves the stroke and the texture while gently taking out the glare. Of course, you do have to still be very gentle with it, but this is the Master's Choice brush, and it's a number 12 flat, so working really well for that. Okay, I'm going to continue this painting with my number 6 filbert. And the next thing to paint, always, from here, darkest dark, lightest light, and then start asking what's the easiest thing to see next. For me, the easiest thing to see next is this sort of purpley gray of the shadow of the cornfield back there. That's the easiest thing for me to see next. Cobalt, alizarin, white. Get a nice purple color there. I'm going to take a little bismuth, add it to that so it's not too purple. I'm going to gray it off a little bit. Note that the value is going to be something more like a number 2 on this scale. It's not black, right? And you can see that in the source. If you squint at that cornfield, it's not nearly as dark. This shadow shape back in here, not nearly as dark as the rooster. And leave that there for you. And this is what's called the block-in. First layer of color here. Lots of changes and Adaptations to come. This is tube consistency. I don't have any medium or mineral spirits or anything in the paint right now. There's that shape. And it's just a big sort of gray purple. Now, are there other colors in there? For sure, right? There are yellows and there are greens and maybe some bluer tones in there too. So all that's happening in there for sure. But here's the thing. I want to just start with the big average color. I want a color that'll stand in for all the other colors until I can get in there and add a little bit more color breakup in there. So that was the easiest shape for me to see. And now what's the easiest shape for me to see next? For me, it's just the grass around. And I need to push the chroma. So I'm if you look down at the source, you see how it's more yellow. That sunlight's more yellow, and it's kind of minty toothpastey for me here, and it's the same right here on my palette. So I'm just going to add more bismuth to that, and even more. I'm just going to have a lot more bismuth. Now I'm mixing a cooler green with my cooler yellow. Gold ochre is a warmer yellow, and I haven't put any in yet. Yeah, that's much better. See that? There's a little bit of a shift there now between that colder green and now my warmer green in here. I'm gonna keep pushing that. This is not a green. This green that I'm making right here, this is not a green that you would see in the evening. You wouldn't see this at golden hour. You wouldn't see this when the sun is low in the sky in the afternoon. You're going to see a green that's a lot more golden, right? So I'm going to put my gold ochre in there just so you can see what I mean. This is more the yellow of grass in the sunlight in the evening, right here. So let me get the glare out of that so you can see it. See the difference? A lot more red orange here, a lot more bright, fresh, glowing yellow here. So if you've noticed, I've been using a filbert brush so far today, except for the brush to remove the glare. And that's just because filberts have a naturally soft edge stroke. So let me just show you. That's the edge of a filbert. And if I were to do the same stroke with a flat, let me get my comparable flat brush here. The edges are a lot more sharp because you just have a sharper edge when you don't have those bristles curving away from the point of impact. So a lot more chiseled strokes with flats, a lot more soft strokes with filberts. And since I'm blocking in, I don't want things to get too harsh in the edge work. These filberts are perfect. Mixing a little bit of white in, still keeping that value of just about a number 7. but a little bit of white in there just so it doesn't get too green. You want to make sure it stays that fresh looking yellow. This is tube consistency paint. It works well. I've used Holbein and it's high quality enough so I don't need to put a bunch of medium in it to make it so that it moves around.
Tim, I have a question.
Yes.
So this minty yellow is good because we're up close, but if it went to the distance, how would you mute the morning yellow? Would you add a violet to it and let it just go towards violet as it goes back?
Yeah, really good question. Yeah, it would stay. You would basically just want to gray it off. And you mentioned adding a violet. That would be a really good thing to do because that would move it towards gray. So how do you handle morning light in atmospheric perspective together? And I think the thing that you would do is make sure that it's getting less and less chromatic, but it wouldn't be that amber color light in the distance. That's what you'd want to avoid. As soon as you start going towards those more orange, golden colors for the distant light in the morning, it's going to be kind of confusing if you're painting, for the viewer to understand what the um, what the color is. And I'm just going to do a quick.
So would you add white and have it go
Some white, some
cooler?
white, and then what you suggested. I'm sorry, go on.
It would go cooler or no? Because if you put lavender in with the yellow, it does go, it can go warmer, right? Or it won't.
You would want it to be less green. So yeah, lavender would gray out that yellow green. But I actually have a source photo I want to share with you right now. So let's see, where are we? So if you go to today's lesson and you scroll all the way down, I put a few other practice paintings in here or practice sources. Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So I think this one is this is a picture that Greg shared with us, but you can see obviously morning light and look at how gray that is. That yellow grass off underneath the house, really, really gray. So that yellow is definitely graying off, but it's also it's not moving towards orange. And this one is really, really vivid. Might be a little bit overdone, but no, let's take a look at this. So you can just see, nice warmth in the yellow grasses up here. And then as we go back, it's definitely going to get grayer. So it's not as vivid, even though it still is a nice bright color back there as these yellows are. But all together, none of it is as orange as it would be at evening. And I actually have, let me see. I'm pretty sure there's another source folder that I have for you that has this picture in it. So this is that same landscape. And just look at how much more orange it is, even in the distance at evening. You can really see the difference. Okay, so yeah, does that
Yes.
Does that answer the question, or?
I think it's the idea of not going to orange, and I think that is where my mistake is I naturally go more golden as it goes back rather than thinking it has to go gray when it's, you have that brightness from the morning light. I think
Right. Yeah. That is exactly what's going to help, because if you just think that the main thing that's happening when you see color going away from you is that it's getting grayer, then that'll really help you understand what's happening, because it's not necessarily changing, from one hue to another.
Mhm.
It's just a more and more and more desaturated version of the hue that you have in the foreground.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking the question.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So that yellow, that more distant yellow in the morning light, is it the same exact value, or does the value change as you go back in space?
As you go back in space, what's happening in the atmospheric perspective is basically the darks get lighter and the lights get darker. And eventually, if you're looking at mountains in the very, very, very great distance, they essentially just fade into the color of the sky. So if something is very light in the foreground, it's going to be getting darker. I'm sorry. Yes. It's very light in the foreground. It's going to be getting darker and darker and darker as it goes back. And then something that's very dark in the foreground is going to be getting lighter and lighter and lighter.
So even in this short distance, you should have a gradation?
Yeah. So even in this short distance right here, take a look. Just, looking at how much contrast there is between the bird and the grass. We could start with that. But even, the bird is the only bird there. So how about this? Look at the contrast between the shadow of the bird and the grass. And then look at the same sort of things, the contrast between the shadow of the corn and the grass back there. Just a little less contrast if you squint. I'll get rid of that stuff so you can see that. So yes, even from here to here, that shadow is getting a little bit lighter, and that grass is getting a little bit darker. They're moving toward each other.
Thank you.
For sure. Okay, let me keep that on. Okay. Now, this already, this is already morning light, right? This is not noon. Noon is a silver gray light, and it's not evening because it's way too yellow cool for evening. It would be much more orange if it were evening. So we've already caught the morning light here. And now it's just a matter of continuing the block in and then working into this painting to finish it. So what shape is the easiest one for me to see next? I'm going to say it's this one right in here, the shadow being cast by the rooster. So I'm going to come in, and this is what we had before. I'm going to add a little bit more. Let's see, it was bismuth, cobalt, and alizarin to make this color. The bismuth, I'm sorry, yes, the cobalt and the alizarin to make the violet, and the bismuth to make it a little bit more gray, maybe even a little bit more green. So I've remixed this, but just with a little bit more of the cobalt and the alizarin. It's a little bit darker, and that can be our rooster shadow in the foreground. That's actually still too dark, so I'm gonna add some more bismuth.
I don't know if this is a good question, but I'm also having a problem knowing when to use ultramarine for my blue for a shadow and when to use cobalt. How do you make that choice?
Right. Yeah, they are really close to each other. And so, they're both going to be a pretty good choice most of the time. Just add a little bit of cobalt and a little bit of white, make it a little bit cooler, bluer there. Yeah, they're both going to be a pretty good choice most of the time. The difference between them is that gold ochre, I'm sorry, cobalt. Oh, cobalt blue is a little bit, it's more of a blue blue. Ultramarine is a little bit more towards violet. And so when you add yellow to violet, what do you get? Gray, right? Because they're opposite each other. So having a blue that's shifted toward violet means that your greens are all going to be grayer. Cobalt is going to have cleaner greens, and then Viridian is going to have loud greens potentially because it's so far towards yellow in that blue. So if you want a grayer green, ultramarine is a great choice. Also, if you want a darker shadow, ultramarine is naturally darker, so that makes it a good choice there. There's a lot of overlap in how you can use them. Those are the main reasons why I would choose one over the other. In this case, I was looking for a little bit less gray, a little bit fresher of that green blue with my cobalt in here. Okay, what's the easiest thing to see next? Definitely getting into the last things for the block in, right? So the finished painting, not yet, but the block in. Let's start painting in some of the rooster here. And so I see some darker red color in his local value. Just going to take Viridian and transparent oxide red, add them to each other. And that's definitely still way too, that's way too just dark and black and brown. So I'm going to take gold ochre and add a lot of gold ochre to that mixture right there. Some more transparent oxide red. You've got a brown red rooster here. Let's try that again. How's that? That's better, but still not quite light enough. I'm going to actually go all the way to bismuth. Bismuth is almost white, so it really changes the value. And the value now is right in there to number 2. That's starting to look a little bit more like it. I'm going to scumble in this color. All right, and then I'm going to take some, let's remix a color here. Alizarin, right here, my beautiful, rich, cool red, and bismuth. So I'm going to get an orange. And if it's a little too orange, I'm just going to add some ultramarine, unorange it. There we go. See that much more rich orange? Gonna go right in here, I'm thinking. Okay, and do you see all that glare? See, and if you can see it there, it's because the painting's lit from above. It's always going to be lit from above, probably. Most paintings are. I'm just going to gently pull out the glare. There. Now there's no glare. That's good.
Tim, can I go back to the blue shadow for 1 second? Is in the morning, wouldn't you want more violet so the yellow light shows up more as a complement? Why do you choose a blue shadow, or wouldn't it just be a rich green shadow? I've been having that problem of how you make that decision.
Right. Yeah. And I think that I am seeing violet and painting violet in here. It's honestly just what I saw in the source. So it is still a big blue sky up above, but I do see what you're saying. Moving it towards violet complements all those yellows. So, definitely as I go towards finishing it, I could make that adjustment. But yeah, I think that the main thing for me is more the color of the light itself. You still have that big blue sky up above, so it's still going to cast a lot of blue down in, but I would just tend to put in those little touches of color differentiation at a stage farther. I
Okay,
don't know if that helps. Right now I'm looking for average color,
okay.
and so you could block it in with either in the
Okay.
very beginning.
But you would never make a shadow a dark green because the grass could go green as a shadow, just dark. Or you would never, you would give it a blue or a violet cast.
Yeah, typically having just like it depends on where it's happening. So that's part of this. Uh, if the shadow is being cast with the big blue sky up above,
Mhm.
it's going to have to be cool.
Okay,
And so if it's in the woods, maybe, right? So there's all the sky is blocked out. I have a plein air sketch from a little while ago, which I think might kind of answer what you're asking there. If I can. Here it is. Okay. So this is a painting of the woods. It's a plein air painting, and it
Mhm.
was just a woodland interior. And you can see I would call a lot of those just dark greens, those
Exactly.
shadows.
Yes.
Those occur where the sky really can't get to those shadows.
Okay, that really helps me.
So it's basically, if you can think of the light coming from the sky like rain,
Mm-hmm.
anything that would get soaked in the rain would get soaked in the color of the sky. If you have things that are relatively dry, like stashed under trees or inside barns or things like that, that's where you would have shadows that are not as influenced by the color of the sky.
Okay, that really helps. Thank you.
Absolutely. A little bit of some strokes just showing movement. And this is where we need to talk about form a little bit. I'm going to bring in some of the color of the grass. I'm going to start playing with bringing just a tiny bit of that reflection because he's a sleek and shiny creature, right? He's not, well, he's sleek and shiny. I don't have to say anything more. So he's going to have some really beautiful reflected light bouncing off his um, his stomach, his legs, his breasts right in here. You know, he's not going to be black all the way down. And that's an alteration from the source photo. We don't have that in the source photo at all. And that's where, you know, I know how form works, and yeah, it's pretty straightforward. The sunlight goes by, it hits the planes that are facing toward it, and it misses the planes that are facing away from it, and then it bounces back up into the planes that are facing away from it. So I'm just bringing some of the reflection of that green grass into the planes facing down towards that green grass. That's just what would happen. This is something, I don't think I discovered this painting the landscape. This was from painting still life, right? And in the month of August, I'd really love to get some still life paintings in our things to study as we're studying color and, well, really color together. Okay, I'm going to bring in some just straight bismuth. And I'm going to gently drag in this straight bismuth here. Just really get that reflected sunlight happening there. Take out the glare, smooth things out a little bit. See how much that just ties the bird to the grass? I'm going to do one more. This is just pure bismuth. I'm running it right down the gap or the edge, the line, the border. That's the word I'm looking for. The border between the grass and the rooster, using my number 6, just gently putting that in there. It's a little bit softer. You can feel that glow on there now. Okay, all of that's just, this morning light is strong and it's bouncing around. We were talking just a moment ago about blue and the blue sky. So I'm just going to take ultramarine and white to make a blue. And we can make this a little bit more violet to complement the yellows. That's totally fine. That's more an invention of color harmony. Just know that violet's on the other side of the color wheel from yellow, so it makes yellow look good. And it makes sense that you would have a lot of that in the morning, since the light is more yellow. I'm going to take that and I'm just going to put it on some of these planes that are facing up. Now, what value are we looking at? Yeah, still that number 2 value. So it's still quite dark. And we're just going to put these on the planes facing up toward, I'm going to pull some Viridian in there too. These are facing up toward that blue sky. That whole speech that I just gave about color and, you know, dark green and light green applies here. The part of the rooster that's facing down toward the grass is going to have that warm yellow, right? That reflected light down in there. The part of the rooster facing up towards our morning sky is going to be a lot more blue, right? So those feathers facing up, blue. Those feathers facing down, more of those green. Okay, so, but what about the parts of the rooster that are, you know, the sun is falling right on them? Well, those are going to be much warmer. I'm going to switch to my number 2 filbert to get in there and paint those. But I'm still going to stay for that bismuth, but I needed to add some transparent, or actually it's pyrrole right here. We could use transparent oxide red too to accomplish about the same thing. So 2 different versions there. This is a little bit more orange, a little bit pinker. This is the sunlight. And now, what you didn't see is I loaded up my brush with lots and lots of paint, and it kind of splayed the tip. I'm just reshaping that tip a little bit so that I can be really accurate with this stroke here.
Sorry,
Come on.
sorry, Tim, what were those colors you just used?
Those were bismuth, white, and pyrrole. And the value is also going to be, yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm seeing the value is right in there at a number 7. Oh, number 8, which is what you want. It's going to be about the same value as the grass was, obviously a completely different color.
Added just a little bit of transparent oxide red, I think.
Yeah, so I'll reshape that for you. You could do either. I'm going to go with bismuth, pyrrole, and white. And just keep it nice and clean, that bright yellow orange. And the reason it's an orange is because of the color of the rooster, right? So you have to be careful here. I don't want it to look like evening light on the rooster, but if it were evening light, it would just make the rooster, who is orange already, much, much more orange. There we go. Bismuth, pyrrole, white, got the value. Now, this right here, something happens, and it's kind of, understandable, I think, to just be like, okay, and let's bring this all the way along his back too. But there's an angle change here, isn't there? Right? He's not the same value. He's not the same temperature on his back. It gets a little bit different. And this is where we see, because it's facing a little bit away from the sky by the time you get to his back, it gets a little bit grayer because we have that blue cast from the sky graying it, and it's not quite as light either. It's not, that angle right now is just facing right towards the sun. That angle is not the same. That's what I'm talking about. So those are the subtle little differences that will make your paintings stop looking like paint and start looking like light, catching those little tiny differences. And so be on guard. Anytime the angle changes, you're going to have a little bit of a color change too. So we had bismuth and pyrrole. Let's try this with bismuth and alizarin and white. All right, so a little bit grayer, a little bit darker, and the rooster himself is a little bit different color on his back than his neck, and add a little bit of that ultramarine blue too. So this is going to be, it's going to be a lot lighter than the shadow, but we're changing, and we're not going to be as orange. Wing. And then let's go back to here. More red, more of that alizarin, a little bit more of the bismuth. And there's that red back that's just sort of fading. Okay, let's get some core shadow in there. Alizarin, and let's just start off with pure alizarin. Gonna push back on the edges of those lights a little. Okay, there's more that I want to do here, but I don't want to get too caught up. The block-in isn't even quite done yet. So while we're here, let's take alizarin and pyrrole and mix them together into this super red. I'm going to add just a touch of white to this, but even with this additional value here, it's going to remain very strong. But we're bringing it back to about the value of pyrrole all by itself. But pyrrole all by itself is pretty orangey, and I needed it to be a little bit cooler. This is for the comb. This is for the light shining through the comb. And squint. It could be a little bit lighter still. Now, if this were the golden orange light of evening shining through that rooster's comb, it would again be way, way more orange. And these things are all just telling my mind, right? My eye and my mind, what time of day it is, right? All these subtle little things. It would have been, it's tempting to just go pyrrole right there, right? So let's just take our reddest red and really go for it there. But I hope I've explained why you wouldn't want to do that. Just remaining true to this morning light. And take the glare out too. All right, and then the same color right in here. And then as it goes up into the shadow that his head casts, just taking some pure alizarin. Pure alizarin right in there. Still a number 2. Here's the beak. Okay, now, let me see. I think that getting some of these darks as they tuck in here. Now, which darks were those? Those were our original cobalt transparent oxide red. So not black, not as black as could be, but still quite dark here. And you can see them in places here. You can see the different colors and feathers here. It's all quite dark, so let me, oh, and as I'm using my number 12 Master's Choice brush here, I'm taking and pushing it into paper towels, keeping it nice and clean, but I'm not dipping it in mineral spirits at all, because then it would just soak all that up, and every time I touched my painting, it would be like mopping, right? It would just scrub off everything there. I want it to be as dry and clean as possible. And so that means just paper towels for most of the work here. One more shape and the block-in's done, and then we can move on to the next stage of the painting. If you look back here, you still need that shape. And if we look at the source, it's that sort of dry grass, not quite dead, but moving in that direction or dormant there. So I'm just going to take my bismuth I'm gonna mix the bismuth with my redder, right? We talked about that. This is going to be a more gray mixture because I mixed bismuth with ultramarine blue. So it's going to be a grayer green to begin with. We're also going to do a little bit more than just a gray green here. Also going to take a tiny bit transparent oxide red to give myself that earthy brown in there and just fill it into that shape. So it still looks pretty chromatic. I'm going to actually dull that down a little bit. Here we go. Yeah, it still looks nice and like it should, sunlight, hopefully back there. But not as strong as the greens in the foreground. And this gets to the question you were asking. I think you asked this question, Randy, about how light looks going back. So you see how this is a grayer yellow, but it's still not that orange of evening. Now I just want to compare that, this one that I painted here. Look at the difference.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So this is what you want. You want them to look like they belong to each other, but there's no way that you could reverse them. There's no way that we could take this, I'm going to do this too, and put this back here. Do you see how that totally destroys the feeling of depth?
Yes.
Both of these strokes do. So this is the grayer version of that morning sunlight
You
going
put
back into the distance.
pyrrole in it, or what did you put into that green? I forget. The one in the
Yeah,
distance.
this one right here
Yeah.
was bismuth, ultramarine, and then a tiny bit of transparent oxide red.
Okay. Thank you. And with one other thing about the shadow, late in the day, would it go more purple? The blue shadow?
So I often find it goes even more blue because everything around it is so orange.
Okay.
So
Oh, yeah.
if you
that
put,
makes sense.
yeah, if you put, yeah, and I don't have, so if you were to take just a word picture for now, and I'll demonstrate this at some point, if you were to take a violet blue, right? So it's right on that borderline between blue and violet,
Mhm.
and you put it next to pure yellow, it would make it look very violet. And then you take the yellow away and you put it next to pure orange, and it would make that blue violet look much more blue, right? Just as it interacts with that second color. So in the evening, you have more of that blue light. I'm sorry, you have more blue shadows because they're just in contrast to the orange.
Okay.
And the same thing in the morning.
Okay. Thank you.
For sure.
Just trying to process all the color of light and shadow. It's,
Oh, that's why we're here. That's why we're here. I appreciate the questions.
thank you.
I'm going to soften this for now. Because here we go. And there's this foot, which is actually in the air. Okay, now it looks a little bit more like a rooster in movement here. Okay, so in the time that we have left, this is the exact process I always use. If you've painted with me before, you've seen it before. This is the process for getting the block-in done. And it was completed asking the question, what's the easiest thing to see next? What's the easiest thing to see next? What's the easiest thing to see next? And you just keep asking that question and answering it with one more shape until all the shapes are there, right? And now it's kind of like having that big lump of clay. You can start really sculpting now, right? And the best way forward from here is to start asking the question, what bothers me most? And that's going to always kind of save the day. What bothers me most? And so right away, the thing that's bothering me most is the lack of depth between the rooster and this purple shadow up here. It's just, I just want to see a little bit more of what I can see in the source. They're really, if you look at the source, two different planes. We have the flat land coming back, and then it becomes vertical on that field. Now, right at that angle change where we have a vertical stand of corn, do you see the color and value change right through there? That's because the angle to the light is changing. So this, what this has to do with painting morning light is you've got to make sure that you stay pretty cool with all of that. You don't want to start getting brown orange shadows in there because it won't look like that fresh, clean, clear light of morning with its cool shadows and really crisp yellow light. So here we go. Let's start breaking that up. That's what's bothering me the most. I'm going to take Viridian and going to clear a spot. Viridian and bismuth. But then when I see them together, I just know it's going to be way, way more work. We don't need to start with Viridian. Let's actually start with cobalt blue and yellow. While we're on the subject, since painting green is such a challenge, here's cobalt and bismuth, right? And it's just going to be a different chroma. It's going to be grayer, right? It's not going to be quite so yellow green. Then you take ultramarine, I'll put it over here, and you mix that, and it's going to be the grayest and sort of least green of them all, right? So that's the three different blues. Now, I think that if we take some white and we add some white and some more cobalt in there, you get a nice morning grass shadow color. We're right back in here. And I am definitely, I could use a larger brush. I'm using my number 2. I'm just going to pull in the number 4 filbert instead. So here it is. And I just clean it out in mineral spirits, and I'm making sure that I get all the mineral spirits out of those bristles. And I'm not trying to get rid of the purple that's already here. I'm just trying to alter it. So there we go. That trio right there. That cool red, the orange that isn't all blown out. That's just looking so much like the morning. I'm gonna take the glare out. Now, why this first? There's just one reason. It bothered me the most. What about it bothered me? The temperature, right? The temperature. Well, actually, you know what? Not the temperature. Forgive me. The hue, right? It was purple and I wanted it to be green. So I changed the hue. And also the value is different here too. You can see as I bring these shapes in, I am adjusting the shapes that are already there. So I'm gonna come in with my, this is a number 2 flat, and I'm on the palette here, just getting a little bit more of that red that we had for the comb, and I'm just gonna bring that back in right there. There's a good use of the flat, nice and sharp. Gently, softly fade that into the shadow of his neck and head there. Okay, and I just need to see a little bit more. So I'm gonna actually take a new mixture, add a lot of white to that pyrrole, which is gonna cool it off. This isn't gonna work for everything, but just a little tiny bit more intensity. Right in there.
That is
You can see the
gorgeous.
sunlight. Thank you. And the reason why we could use pyrrole there is just because pyrrole, when you add a lot of white to it, white cools everything off. Titanium white does specifically. So that did the job for us. Now there's one thing we have to decide here. If you look at the source, you see how you can see sunlight behind the rooster? Do we want to bring that in, that little sort of slice of sunlight right there above his back, or do we want to leave the back just as that rim light? And I'm thinking, you know, we're going to break from the source just a little bit here. I'm going to bring in this green all the way down, and I'm just going to let that rooster's back not compete with the grass back there. And do that too, so you kind of feel like the one thing that's really fun to do. I'm just going to do it a couple times because it's just to take a stroke straight from the movement of the animal and just bring it right into the background like that. And I'm going to get rid of the glare so you can see that. But these strokes now, they're going to have to be modified a little bit, but they help you catch the idea that this fellow is on the move. He is not a still creature. So you're thinking backgrounds, how to show backgrounds. Just flick, soft, right? So a little bit more concerned with effect and a little bit less with drawing. I'm just going to fix the drawing a little bit with my fingertips there. And there's something left of the way the rooster is moving in the strokes. This is just some pure bismuth right there, right along the edge. Okay, so here he is. He looks like a rooster in the morning sun. There's a lot to do. And how do you prioritize? How do you pick the thing to do next, right? Because he's not done. For me, it's always just ask the question, what bothers me the most? That's the most helpful thing. I'm going to introduce a little bit more of a transition here. I'm going to take my bismuth and I'm going to actually do bismuth viridian. I'm looking for a dark, vibrant green. So bismuth viridian, transparent oxide red. And the actual value, yeah, right in there at that number 2. And I want to get in here, right in his neck, and just introduce a little bit of a transitional color right there. And there. These are, to me, these are the little strokes that breathe life into the paintings. And the reason that they do is because I'm showing you light here. The green is reflecting up from the grass into the rooster. So that's just making it look like he's part of this landscape, part of this light. Really, really helpful to have that. So I corrected the drawing, but I strayed from all those reds and browns, which are in the source, to show how that morning sunlight is bouncing off the grass and into the rooster's neck. This is with my Filbert #2 brush here, which is really perfect for drawing because you can see how fine a line I can get with it here and there. Also, this is a bit of a transitional value. We can get a little bit more of a sense of the softness that we could have right here. Those feathers there. Okay, what's bothering me the most now? Right, what's the next thing on the list here? I'm going to take that same exact green. How did I mix it? Bismuth, Viridian, transparent oxide red right here. And it's going to gently introduce it to some more of the underside of this bird. Now, that was a brush effect, just stumbling in, sort of chopping that brush up and down, out into the background. And that's something that I'm very interested in doing on the trailing side of the rooster, but not the leading side of the rooster. So just to lose a little information, and of course that edge scumbling in there too. That's really a nice look for catching that shimmer, right? But I'm not doing it on the front edge because I don't want it to look like it's a blurry painting. I want it to look like the rooster's moving. So by leaving that a crisp and clear edge and letting that edge be a little bit fuzzier, do you see the motion we're getting in this? And that all has more to do with edges than color. But hey, I want you to learn everything you can from each one of these painting sessions. That's how edges can show movement. Just cleaning up the shape with my grass colors again right in here. Redrawing somewhat.
That's such a great tip about movement.
Yeah, thank you. And that it is one of those things that I actually was painting chickadees. And chickadees, if you watch them on a bird feeder, they are so one of my friends described them as little balls of anxiety, right? Like they're just this constant spaz of movement, little chickadees are. And so trying to show them in a painting, I was just always making them look kind of dead. And then this sort of thing made them come to life. And it's they have to look like they're moving. The only time a chickadee still is if it's asleep or, of course, expired.
Wow. Ooh.
This is just modifying. This is an edge thing too. But that green, remember that Viridian bismuth right in here? Let's put that right in that transition. Let's make it a little bit more bismuth. There we go. And this is the grass shining through, or I'm sorry, the sun, that morning sun shining through the grass. So making it very, very, very verdant. Now, I want to revisit that idea of going more violet with that shadow. And I really, really like that idea. Especially now, why would you go more violet? Is it more violet? Well, I think that we're using, and pretty sure this is you, Randy, who brought this up, but we're using the color wheel and color theory and color complements to make certain parts of the painting shine as a specific color. So we're trying to capture the yellow quality, the pristine yellow quality to this morning sunlight. And how do we do that? Well, of course, it isn't just the mixtures of these colors, right? We put some yellow in the actual undertone. Been very conscious of that yellow all the way through, but let's actually take some violets and push those violets so that brings out the yellow and the green more too. That's a really good idea. And we can be subtle enough about it. There's some painters who are very impressionistic with their colors, so they would just go straight violet. If you're more of a naturalist with your colors, you want to paint what you think is there or what it looks like, then maybe you don't want to go quite so colorful. But in any case, just a little bit of a shift towards violet is going to help us make the case about the morning light. So I've got my number, let's see, it is a number 8. And I'm going to take ultramarine, alizarin, and white. And we are going to make a beautiful violet color. There we go. And I think a blue violet right in there. The value, I'm going to bring it up a little bit from that number 2, try to bring it up to a number 3. Since we're going to be dealing with shadows that are not that rooster. The rooster was kind of in that number 2. But let's go, yeah, there we go, up to a number 3. And I'm not wanting to take this and make it the new color of everything, but I'm just going to gently drag it over and just modify that a little bit. And that still feels a little dark to me. Just adding some more white. I love the idea of complements because do you see how it just looks like a shadow brushed over those yellow greens, right? They're just sort of graying out. Looks like grass. But now let's take it in its more direct form and just drag it into here. Not okay. So this is where this is a specific tip I have on painting, and it's by specific, I mean specific to me. And if you like it, you can have it. If you don't like it, no need to apply it. But I like to think of my paintings like water, where you're in very deep water but you can see all the way down to the bottom, right? And so when you look at the surface of the painting, I want you to not only see the actual surface, but I want you to be able to see the depth of the painting. And that just means that when I'm coming over opaque pieces of paint or with opaque pieces of paint, I'm going to be really careful not to just, paint this up here or the grass or this shadow like I'm painting a wall in the house, right? I want to make sure that I'm not fully covering, always just modifying, almost never removing or obliterating or whatever, however you want to think of it. I don't want to lose the beauty that I already had. I just want to make it more beautiful. So there we go. All right. What bothers me most? I think what needs to be done in the next little passage of time that we have left on this is I want to see a little bit more finish right in here, and I want to see a little bit more finish on his legs. Pretty happy with the overall look of the sunlight here. But before I get there, there's just a little bit more to do. If you look at the source, and again, it's not showing up here on my computer screen as well as it is on my iPad. So I would really encourage you to, I sent the Google link drive so you can download this. You can look at it on your own monitor, this source photo. You can print it, you can have it printed, whatever you've got to do to get a really, really good look at it. I'm going to take white. I'm just going to add a lot of white and yellow. And I want this really bright yellow. This is going to be the highlight on the grass. This is a number 8. This is my number 8 brush still. And I'm just going to gently drag in a little bit of that highlight.
What's the value of that?
Oh, thank you for asking. I
I
would
always
say
get
right
to-
in, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, number 9.
number 9, thank you.
Number 9. So it's really, really bright. And this is that lightest light again, but thinking of layering, that grass underneath is starting to show up. I don't want to paint all the grass this color. This is the morning dew, the morning moisture, just reflecting in the sunlight. So it's a little bit, just a little bit more of this going on here than we would in the evening typically. And we're painting golden evening light together next week. So all of this comparison is going to show up and it'll make a lot more sense. But here we are, we're just painting that fresh, clean morning light on these sparkling blades of grass here. And for me, that really, really, really helps. It's just so much more authentically morning light with that little bit of sparkle here. I actually am just cleaning my brush, and I was mixing and I went for some white and I accidentally grabbed the white from right there where all that red from the comb, if you remember the rooster's comb, and turned my green too orange to use. So started over a new mixture right here. One thing here is really helpful for me in understanding what I'm doing here with these colors of the grass in the sunlight here. If I were to take this cooler white green and put it everywhere, I would really lose the warm quality, right? It's not good everywhere. It's only good introduced here and there to get that feeling of grass that's in the morning sunlight. There's a portrait artist named Joe Bowler who would mix, I think it was cerulean and white, and he would put it on these little places on the cool light side of the face. And he was just making it look, he was just making it look like it was that north daylight, you know, that bluish gray light that portrait painters paint a lot. And it was just that subtle little touch that made the light look cool. And he was using actual blue. And if he'd put that blue everywhere, he would have made it look like the person was standing in moonlight. But it's just those little touches that really made it work. So, you know, sometimes it can feel like if it works in one place, it would work everywhere. And if it doesn't, why wouldn't it? And, you know, that's why we need this combination of colors together. And they come together and really give us what grass looks like with all of its variety. All right, on the palette, this is titanium, bismuth, and viridian. First, I'm gonna test this out right now. Needs to be a little bit more bismuth. There we go. Okay. There are a couple of edges to refining. I'm gonna take my palette knife and just on the leading edge of the rooster right here, gonna give that nice little crisp edge. So he looks like he's walking forward. I'm gonna take the same tool all cleaned off and just drag it back that way. So that's the last, probably, time I'll mention that, but that movement of the rooster from the leading edge to the trailing edge. Now, I'm gonna take back my number 2 filbert, get it all cleaned out. A little bit more of a highlight. So this was, if you recall, pyrrole, bismuth, and white. I'm gonna put even more white and even more bismuth and even more white. Get a nice bright highlight. And just going to increase that sunlight just a little bit more. And get the way those feathers are folding together. And hey, let's do this. Right next to it, let's just go for violet. This is that ultramarine, alizarin, and white. Now there's a lot more white in there because it's got to be a very similar value to that. But let's transition straight from the yellow to a little bit of that gray violet right in there. And that is going to, oops, let's see. That is going to help us feel that sunlight and sky, right? So the sunlight and the sky. Pretty sophisticated, but it's one of those things that just helps it feel more real. So we're accounting for the color of the light, the color of the sky, the color of the rooster, all those things coming together. And it takes some variation to make that all work out, I think. And there were a couple of opportunities for, I think, cobalt and viridian and white. You get a very blue-green. And these are things that are just unique to him, right? So let's push that little bit more of that iridescent quality in there. A little bit lighter right there. And
Really
since we
captured-
didn't, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying that that color really captured that iridescence. It's amazing.
He is so much fun to paint. Sheep aren't very colorful. I might get into chickens now. There we go. And then there's just a little bit more. Oh, let me take the glare out so you can see it. I just brought in this crisp edge of black. Catch those black tail feathers. We didn't have the light back there. We took it out, right? So just want you to be able to see the shape of his tail there. Okay, a little bit more to do. I'm actually going to switch down all the way to my, this is a liner, and they are almost a dime a dozen. You can get them at all hobby stores, you know, even grocery stores sometimes have these brushes. So there's nothing special about it. It's just the liner. It comes in the Polar Flow pack that I like to paint with and recommend here. And I'm just going to move my whole camera closer for a second so that you can, we're going to go in for some much tighter detail here. That's still as close as I can get. Pretty small painting. There we go. All right, and I'm zoomed in here too. I just want to get these things correct enough so that he doesn't look unfinished. So here we are. And let me put this up so we can all see that same thing. So first of all, there's a little bit more of that red or orange actual color of the rooster coming over here a little bit farther on the top of his head. And then his eye is going to be way, way, way back. You're going to bring in some of that violet. And that's his eye right in there. I actually have a T-square. So this is not the best tool for this, but I can hook it over the top. Just steady my hand. Now, one thing I want to observe about his beak is that it's purple and yellow. Right? So it's not it's not like what you would think of as a maybe a beak color, whatever that is. It's purple and it's yellow. And so the top is that darker purple, and the bottom is that yellow glow from the grass in the morning light there. which is a theme that's repeated itself all the way through. This painting.
What did you say the bottom of the beak was again?
It's just a yellow glow. So the color we were using in here, I just continued that. So it was a bismuth, pyrrole, and yeah, I think bismuth and pyrrole, and just working it into that paint that's already there, so it's nice and dark. But we have that that reflection now. And then take, this is straight alizarin, the leading edge. Coming down a little bit farther. There we go. And the way that it tucks under the beak and then comes down to can be a little bit different right there. And then a little bit more titanium here. Palette titanium plus whites. I'm sorry, titanium white plus pyrrole, plus a little bit of that bismuth. A little bit more. This is going to be the color of his comb in the direct sunlight. It's going to be the last thing I do here today, but can't not have it. And let's just find it on the light side of a few here. And more of that, just pyrrole and white, fill in that shape down there. Take just, make those legs a little bit more green. This is actually the one time I'm using gold ochre today.
What color is his eyeball?
You know, it is that same cobalt transparent oxide red dark. So it's all just a big gray violet shape, and then I've just put in that little pupil with the same dark I have in here. Play with that edge a little bit more. Okay, let me zoom back out, and there is the morning light demonstration. And summing up again here, the main thing that you're going to be looking for whenever you paint the morning sunlight specifically is when we have that morning light, we're looking for more of that bright, clean yellow as opposed to the oranges of the sunset. That's, or even the golden hour, that's really, for me, there's absolutely no doubt that if what I'd intended here was to paint late evening light, I would have failed entirely, right? Because it just doesn't look like evening, it's morning, right? And the main reason it looks like morning is that yellow quality to the light. And we saw that mostly in the grass, but you also see that on the rooster, right? There's a cooler yellow, not orange quality to the light. Next week, we're going to come back and it's going to be a different landscape. You can look ahead and we're going to be painting golden hour light for 2 weeks, right? So we're going to spend 2 weeks. This is our alla prima sketch here, but also want to make sure we do a more finished piece in this study of the colors of the sun. So that's what we're going to have in the next session. Any questions?
You said that tomorrow you'll be adding a little bit at the beginning. What exactly did you have in mind?
I am going to take the source photo into Photoshop, and let me get the source photo up. I'm going to take the source photo into Photoshop, and I'm going to play with the colors in Photoshop to really exaggerate what warm orange light looks like versus that warm yellow light that we have in the morning.
Ah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.